Urban Miyares was drafted into the Army in 1968. He went to Vietnam as a platoon sergeant.
Never thought I'd get drafted. Just before going to Vietnam, I had my 2-week pass. Joanne and I had our honeymoon, and I was shipped off to Vietnam. My second day, I was already in the combat situation. I was with the platoon and getting ready to lead the platoon into combat, which I was assigned, and I started getting sick. It started out with nausea and vomiting and blurred vision, and I couldn't hold food. And we'd go out in a combat operation, I'd come back, and first diagnosis was, oh, you need to take more salt tablets, it's the heat getting you, heat frustration, and they would say it's battle fatigue. Here I'm leading guys into combat. I don't know what's going on. I could sleep through a firefight. It was getting scary. I didn't think I was going to make it. Yeah, I made a promise to my wife that I would make it back. I didn't know what shape I'd be. Yeah, I'm sick as a dog, and we're going out in this operation. It's early morning. I was so dizzy and weak. I heard screaming and yelling and machine guns going off. Next thing I remember is hitting the water of the rice paddy with my face, and everything went blank. Two days later, I woke up. Someone from my unit, 9th Infantry, came in. He said, they thought you were dead. They threw you in a body bag and found you alive. It was years later before we found the medic, Brian Lee. He opened the body bag and found me alive, breathing, and saved my life.
At a hospital in Saigon, Urban was diagnosed with diabetes.
They told me that I had diabetes. It's a disease you get. I didn't catch it in Vietnam. And, okay, what is diabetes? I had never heard the word before. And you know, the treatment of diabetes then, you got to realize, we're talking 1968. Treatment of diabetes was, we had glass syringes that we had to boil. They were teaching us how to do it. And we had a needle that we sharpened with an emery board. We didn't have disposable needles like today. And we sharpened our own needles. And if you didn't sharpen enough, you get a little hook when you give yourself an injection, you pull it out, and your skin would pinch, and you get a big black and blue mark. My wife was with me, and I said, well, what's the prognosis when I get out of here? And they said, well, if you do go back to work, you're going to have to change professions and get strictly a desk job. That's all. You can never do anything more. You can never do anything physical. They say you'd be lucky if you have 20 years of life left. And that's when Joanne and I said, we're going to live one day at a time.
Living one day at a time, Urban went on to launch 23 businesses. In 1991, he was named Inc. Magazine's Entrepreneur of the Year. Urban had lost his eyesight in 1983.
As a kid, in New York City, we had Central Park. We had a sailing pond there. It was called 72nd Street Sailing Lake, where they had people building model sailboats, and I kept on using that and sailing whenever I had a chance or an opportunity to go sailing. I started looking at sailing magazines, and I loved it. And I got hooked on sailing from that first experience. We put a crew together of sailors with disabilities, and we practiced, raced locally, and wound up entering the race in 2003 to Hawaii, the first time a crew of sailors in the 98-year history of the Transpac Race to Hawaii had ever put together a crew of sailors entirely with disabilities to race in this epic race. It's legendary. It's any sailor, every sailor looks at racing in a number of key events, and a Transpac is one of them. It's probably one of 3 or 4 races that every seasoned sailor wants to be in. It's just a long race. We had planned on being at sea anywhere from 11 to 17 days. And anything could happen, from a medical issue to just plain fatigue. My job mainly was foredeck, running everything front of the mast, because I'm physically, as far as legs go, probably the most able-bodied person, me and one other person, who could run from the mast forward in any sea condition. So I would be on the foredeck handling the big sails, the spinnakers, And if there was a problem, might require climbing up the mast as an example, I'd be the one that would be up first. So we were testing the parameters of what we could and could not do. And of course myself with diabetes, as well as having sight loss, total blindness, not being able to hear, but in strong winds and heavy seas, no one could hear. Well, Challenge America is the most unique program for people with disabilities, where they could go out and get the experience out here on the ocean and learning how to sail. A Challenge America program is one that has constantly testing what a person can and can't do, and especially with the disability, you have to be a little bit more in tune and figure out how you're going to do it, given whatever disability you have. Being classified as severely or catastrophically disabled, there was no one to help you in business if you had a disability. Stay home and wait to die was the attitude. And I said, one of these days, when I could prove someone that's severely disabled can make it in business, I was going to help other vets. And I had 4 business failures before I finally had a business that I was able to make a buck, at least make a buck to get going and support my family. The charity, which is Disabled Businesspersons Association, is an all-volunteer organization, and we help over 3,000 people a year who are interested in starting a business. You know, I suffer from chronic pain. I have spinal cord issues, diabetes, as mentioned before, type 1, kidney disease, end-stage, and organ transplants. I have nerve damage in my legs. Sometimes I have difficulties in walking. Well, you know, the insulin pump is probably one of the 3 greatest inventions of diabetes, in my opinion. You know, of course, the insulin is first, then comes the glucose blood testing machine, and finally the insulin pump. But before the insulin pump came around, I really had difficulty with my diabetes, managing and controlling it. And then in 1996, Dr. Steve Edelman said, you know, let's try to get you a pump. At that time, if you were blind, they didn't want to give you a pump. I've had a number of insulin pumps, and I've had the Animus pump since 2005, and just love it. You know, this pump's gone across the Pacific Ocean already. You know, it's one of those pumps that never seems to break. It just works great. But I listen to it. It has beep on commands. Diabetes is a wake-up call, and most people are not waking up to it. That means diabetes is telling you, you got to do something different. The way everybody's getting diabetes, it's a club that everybody's joining now in record numbers. We have to slow down and really look at ourselves and try to listen or understand our body.